Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of the Analyst. In today's video, we are going to discuss in detail about 5 important topics from the perspective of the UPSC examination, which featured in today's Hindu and Indian Express. The topics are as follows. First of all, we will inquire about the status of poverty in our country based upon the recent data of Consumption Expenditure Survey. After that, we will evaluate the viability of India-Middle East-Europe corridor in the wake of recent crisis in the Red Sea region. Then, we will quickly read about the provisions of the new scheme, that is Pradhan Mantri Surya GHAR Yojana, followed by a recent discovery related to the CHALUKYAS of BADAMI. Towards the end, we will have a quick overlook about ISRO's CE-20 engine, which will be used in the upcoming Gaganyaan mission. The handout for the same will be available in the description of the video for your effective revision. So let's begin. The staggering issue of poverty has been in the forefront of the news because the CEO of the Niti Aayog has recently said that currently only 5% of Indians are below poverty lines. And he has based this estimation on the recently released Consumption Expenditure Survey. Now, despite our economic growth and achievement, which is reflected in India becoming the 5th largest economy, and also we have the fastest growing GDP in the world, but at the same time, the issue of poverty acts as a dent on our economic achievements, which forms an important component of your GS1 paper under the theme of poverty and associated development issues. So let's try to inquire what is the status of poverty in our country. Well, as per the World Bank, poverty is defined as a person who is having low income and inability to acquire basic goods and services which are necessary for survival with dignity. Here, also keep in mind that our Constitution under Article 21 guarantees us the right to dignified life. Also, in the words of Nobel laureate Amartya Sen, poverty is not just lack of money, rather it is an imposed incapability to realize one's full potential. Thus, the issue of poverty has been surrounding our country for time immemorial. And thus, to estimate the level of poverty in our country dates as back as to 1890s, when Dadabhai Naoroji in his book Poverty and Un-British Rule in India estimated that if there is a region and that region has per capita income of 16 to 35 rupees per year, then that regions fall below poverty line. As per Dadabhai Naoroji's estimation, this 16 to 35 rupees is basically the minimum requirement for a region to sustain their basic needs, such as to have clothes on their body and food in their stomach. Finally, in independent India, a uniform estimation was conducted by Dandekar and Rath Committee based upon National Sample Survey, where they estimated the level of poverty on the basis of expenditure which was required to provide 2,250 calories a day both in urban as well as in rural areas. What does it mean? It means that, let's say, if I need to have 2,250 calories a day for my uniform development and healthy life, And to have this much of calorie, let's say I need 5 kind of basic cereals, pulses, vegetables, etc. For which let's say I require minimum income of rupees 20 per day. But if I am unable to even afford this 20 rupees per day, that means I fall in the bracket of poverty. However, in the year of 1979, Alag Committee changed this definition from the requirement of a certain calorie to the basis of nutritional requirement, and to achieve that nutritional requirement, what is the amount of consumption expenditure which will be required. Also, it suggested that whatever are the goods which are required for this nutritional recruitment, then we need to adjust the price level of food with increasing inflation year by year. Again, another detailed estimation was finally conducted by Lakdawala Committee of 1993, which moved away from this calorie based or nutrition based estimation of poverty. Rather, it suggested that we can reflect the level of poverty which is persisting in our country based upon the consumption expenditure by the poor people, and that can be reflected from the consumer price index of industrial workers as well as agricultural laborers. And this expenditure shall be based upon calorie consumptions as it was earlier suggested by the Dandekar and Rath Committee. Also, it suggested that instead of poverty being solely based upon national account statistics, rather each state shall form their own specific poverty lines. And on this basis of how much expenditure is being incurred on what goods and services by industrial workers and agricultural laborers who form the poor section of the society, the Lakdawala Committee estimated that the population which is below the poverty line in the year of 1993 was 36% of the population. However, the Tendulkar Committee, which was formed in the year 2009 by the then Planning Commission, it rejected this calorie-based, nutrition-based, consumer price index-based estimation of poverty. Rather, it suggested that now we are going to estimate poverty on the basis of certain basket of goods, and what is the amount of expenditure which is being incurred for this basket of goods. Now, question arises that what is this basket of goods which was laid down by Tendulkar Committee? Well, this basket of goods comprises of the basic needs which we have on daily basis. For example, there are several kind of cereals which we need, or pulses which we eat, or fruits, vegetables, milk, etc. At the same time, there are certain services which are required by all of us uniformly, such as education, health, entertainment. So whatever is the expenditure on this basket of goods and services, that will be considered to estimate the poverty in our country. At the same time, it tried to lay down a uniform poverty line basket for both urban and rural areas, for which he calculated that in rural areas, if there is expenditure of 816 rupees per capita per month, and in urban areas if that expenditure stands to 1000 rupees per capita per month, below this expenditure, that particular region will be considered as falling below the poverty line. On the very same lines, it calculated the poverty on individual basis, where it decided that the poverty line in urban area will be 33 rupees per day and in rural area it will be 27 rupees per day. Now keep this in mind that when we begin this discussion, we talked about the definition of poverty as given by World Bank. So World Bank also sets down a income line above and below which you can decide the level of poverty. That income line according to World Bank stands at $1.9, which in current time period, in today's time, will be around 150 to 160 rupees per day. Now just look at the staggering difference between the poverty line, which is the globally accepted poverty line as per the World Bank, and the poverty line which was decided by the Tendulkar Committee, which stands at a meager 33 rupees for urban areas and 27 rupees for rural areas. Also, Tendulkar Committee suggested that the private expenditure on health and education shall also be included when we are trying to estimate the poverty level in our country. Thus, according to Tendulkar Committee, in the year of 2011, the population which fell below the poverty line was 21% of our total population, which means 21% of our population did not had a meager income of 33 rupees per day. Then obviously this setting of the income per day at such low basis, as well as trying to decide the uniform poverty line basket, led to uproars in lot of state, thus leading to the establishment of Rangarajan Committee in the year 2014, which based its estimation upon the survey of households by Center of Monitoring Indian Economy, where it said that the earlier suggestions of calorie-based consumption expenditure shall also be included, as well as the income on daily basis or monthly basis shall also be included, thus to provide a uniform coverage of people who fall below the poverty line. Thus, according to the Rangarajan Committee, which submitted its report in the year 2014, the calorie requirement in rural areas was for a person was 2155 kilocalories, and in urban areas it stood at 2090 kilocalories. And the income level of the day for a person in the urban areas was 47 rupees per day, and in the rural areas it was 30 rupees per day, which implies that if I am living in a rural area and I do not have income of 32 rupees per day or 960 rupees per month, then I will be considered as poor. Thus, as per Rangarajan Committee, the estimate of Tendulkar Committee was wrong, and the actual status of poverty in our country as per 2011 level was 29% of the population. However, the report of Rangarajan Committee was not accepted by the government, and thus the current calculation which we do is based upon the Tendulkar Committee's report. For example, you guys might have heard about National Food Security Act 2013, under which the government provides subsidized ration to the poor section of people. How this poor section of the people is estimated? On which committee's report? On Tendulkar's committee report. So till now we have seen the estimation of poverty in our country from various government bodies. Let's also try to inquire the status of poverty from the foreign glances. So, we are going to study the Multi-Dimensional Poverty Index 2023, which is released by UNDP or United Nations Development Programme and OPHDI or Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative, which calculates poverty not on nutrition, calorie or solely on income level. Rather, it calculates the poverty on three broader categories which are required for an overall development of a human being. Those three broader categories are health, education and living standards. For example, under health, the multidimensional poverty index, it includes nutrition, child mortality. Under education, it includes years of schooling and school attendance. Then in the living standard category, it includes the various basic requirements for a person, such as does that household has access to cooking fuel? Do they have regular drinking water supply? Do they live in pakka houses? Do those houses have electricity connection? So on the basis of this broader category, as per MDPI, the level of poverty in our country stands at 18% of population who are multidimensionally poor, accounting to around 230 million people. However, the 2023 report also notes down that the level of poverty in our country has sharply declined from 55% in 2005 and 6 to 18% currently. Thus, we cannot completely reject the idea that there is still large prevalence of poverty in our country. However, the CEO of Niti Aayog has tried to estimate the current status of poverty in our country on the basis of data released under Consumption Expenditure Survey, where he has shown that the inequality which persisted among rural and urban areas has actually declined significantly, as it used to be the consumption divide between urban and rural areas used to stand at 91% in 2004 and 5, and from there it has declined now to 71%. What does this consumption divide stands for? Let's say that earlier the urban areas were like one particular area was spending 100 rupees. So in year 2004 and 5, in comparison to that 100 rupees, the rural area was spending only 9 rupees. But now they are spending up to 29 rupees, which shows that the income of the people in the rural area has increased and their consumption expenditure has also increased. Also, the rural household spending on food has dropped below 50% of their total expenditure for the first time. As we can see here that the food expenditure by the rural areas in the year, earlier it used to stand at 52.9%, but now it has declined to 47%. Also, the bottom 5% of per capita consumption expenditure, now these people are spending low on pulses and cereals and having higher expenditure on consumer durables and services. What does this imply? This implies that now people have higher income and their large share of income is not going towards food only, means to only sustain themselves, but they are now spending more on consumer durables and services such as buying television, vehicle for commute, etc. At the same time, they are having diverse and balanced food consumption. As we can see that the people from rural areas have increased their consumption of milk products, of fruits, of eggs, fish and meat, as well as of beverages and processed food. Thus, they are having a more diverse and balanced food consumption. At the same time, let's say the CEO of Niti Aayog calculates it in this way that the last estimation as per the government, the line of poverty, it stood at rupees 33 per day. So if we are going to factor this for inflation, it will come around rupees 60 now, rupees 60 per day. Now, as per the consumption expenditure survey, the bottom 5% of the rural households are spending around 1782 rupees per month, which means they are spending around 57 rupees per day. Thus, as we can see, it is almost very close to the line of poverty. So, we can say that the majority of the people are falling above the poverty line. Thus, as per the CEO of Niti Aayog, the current population percentage who falls below the poverty line in our country can be estimated to be around 5 to 10%. However, there are several issues which remain when it comes to the estimation of poverty. First and foremost is that there cannot be a uniform poverty line of basket. How there cannot be a uniform poverty line of basket? Because the prices of goods and services, it does not remain uniform throughout our country but keep on changing from one state to another. For example, let's say if me and you, we both consume milk. Now you are living in Jammu and Kashmir and I am living in Uttar Pradesh. So for you, the prices of milk is 50 rupees per liter and for me it is 25 rupees per liter. So how we can form a uniform background to calculate our total expenditure on one particular product? At the same time, as the demography of the country changes, the consumption pattern changes as well. As we can see from the consumption expenditure survey itself, the amount of expenditure on processed food has increased both in urban areas as well as both in rural areas, which shows that now we have more young population in our country. At the same time, not every state have a uniform agreement when it comes to the Tendulkar Committee report. So, a lot of leukemia still persists when it comes to the estimation of poverty in our country. Thus, as we know that the data is the new economy and we need to have a sound data for the existence of poverty in our country to make sure that we actually start implementing data-oriented and brought into uniformity with the global standards such as the poverty standard led by World Bank. With these suggestions, we move forward to the next news of the day. With growing crisis in the Red Sea region, can India Middle East Europe Economic Corridor or IMEC can offer an alternate secure supply chain route for India's global trade. This forms an important component of your GS2 paper under the theme of global groupings and agreements which are affecting India's interest. Now, the Red Sea region is very important for India's trade. At the same time, this region has been infected by various kinds of disturbances recently. Let's first try to understand why Red Sea region holds such a paramount importance for our country's trade. The reason is the existence of Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which you can see in the map here, which lies between two countries, that is Yemen and Djibouti. Now, this trade holds paramount importance for India because it provides the shortest route for India's trade to Europe as well as to the North African region. Also, this trade is the world's busiest cargo and oil transit point, which comprises of 12% of international merchandise trade which flows through this strait. At the same time, this Red Sea route holds a lot of importance for our country because our entire trade to Europe and North Africa goes from this Red Sea region, which comprises of 24% of our exports and 14% of our imports. Thus, our bilateral trade stands as with Europe at $189 billion and with North Africa at $15 billion. Now keep this in mind that under its new export policy, India has set for itself an ambitious target to achieve 2 trillion export by the year of 2030. Thus, we can see to achieve our economic objectives, this region of Red Sea and this Strait of Bab el-Mandab is very important. At the same time, as recently as December 2023, as per a Hindu report, our country is currently 87% import dependent for our oil needs. Thus, the Red Sea is very important for our country. At the same time, this region has been affected by the attack of Houthi rebels who are backed by Iran, which operates from the region of Yemen, and they are trying to target the commercial ships in the Red Sea region, thus impacting the safe line of communication in this region as well as the trade of India as well as various other countries. And this attacks of Houthis can have adverse impact on Indian economy. How? Let's see that. First of all, recently we have started procuring the majority share of our oil from Russia, who has become the largest producer of oil to us. At the same time, we refine a major share of this oil and export it to the region of Europe. And all that passes from the region of Red Sea. Thus, if the trade in this region will get affected, it will cost a huge exchequer on balance of trade of India, which will ultimately impact our balance of payment. At the same time, the rerouting of container and oil carrier from, now they cannot go from the Red Sea region. So what we are doing, we are rerouting this freights to the tip of South Africa via the Cape of Good Hope and then directing them towards Europe. For example, as per the Federation of Indian Export Organization, they are currently holding back 25% of the cargo ships because of the prevailing insecurity in the region. What impact this can have, this rerouting of container and oil carrier? First of all, we all know that the freight charges will increase. At the same time, the cost of oil will increase. The transportation cost will increase. All this will lead to decline in the supply of goods, and at the same time it will also lead to increase in the prices of oil. And this decline in supply of good and increase in price of oil will cause inflation in Indian economy, which is already high as up to 5%. This kind of inflation is what we call as imported inflation. And while this global supply chain has been disrupted, the China is trying to gain from this situation, and it is projecting its China-Europe freight trains, which are part of its Belt and Road Initiative, as viable alternative to the Red Sea route trade which occurs through this route. Thus, there are growing challenges for our country, and also the China is trying to increase its dominance further in this particular region, which is obviously its larger policy of string of pearls which is trying to create around our country. Thus, Indian Middle East Economic Europe Corridor is a very important pillar for our country to tackle all these problems. This Indian Middle East Europe Economic Corridor was launched in the G20 Summit 2023, which comprises of various railroads, ship-to-rail and road networks. It has two major important components. The first is the Eastern Corridor, where, let's say from our JNPT port in Bombay, we will create a ship line which will go to Jebel Ali in UAE. And from there we will create rail and road networks through which we will traverse the whole Middle Eastern region. Also make sure that here the Israel also forms a major component of this trade, where it has an important port of Haifa, from where we will connect to Greece, and ultimately we will take our trade en route to the European region. Thus, this corridor also includes various kind of other alternatives such as electricity cable, hydrogen pipeline and high-speed data cable. Considering the viability of this corridor as a viable alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative, various important countries has become signatories to this initiative, which was launched by India, such as United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Italy, France, Germany, European Union as well as United States of America. Because this corridor promises a potential benefit of cutting the journey time from India to Europe by 40% and cutting the transit cost by further 30%. However, there are also certain challenges which revolves around this economic corridor. The challenges such as to ensure logistic and connectivity. For example, the first challenge which we are going to face is to create the most profitable trade network. And it is very obvious that every country will try to create this multimodal transport network as per their own convenience, where they can see that I am going to have the biggest trade profit from this particular region. At the same time, to create connectivity among all these different countries and to create a legal system which can uniformly govern this multimodal transport corridor. So to come to that agreement, it can be a lot of time taking as well as challenging. The second key challenge is to establish coordination among divergent countries. Because of the recent Israel-Palestine issue, there has been a growing gulf between the Arab countries and Israel. At the same time, the Europe and Arabian countries are divided on the two-state solution of Palestinian region. At the same time, to get all these divergent countries on one platform is going to be very difficult for us. Another challenge which lies is a security challenge. As you can see, this whole infrastructure of IMEC lies in the Strait of Hormuz. And this Strait of Hormuz here is very near to Iran and at the same time Iran has a very strong hold over this region. Thus, it is very obvious that the security challenges which persist in Red Sea can also be reflected in this particular region. At the same time, a lot of economists have suggested that because whatever the freight or the goods and services which we are going to transport, like export and import, it has to pass through multiple countries and transit systems, which will ultimately increase the cost of the product and decline the overall objective of this corridor. Thus, a uniform financial framework and a robust universal agreement on this particular corridor is necessary. And with these given circumstances, this should be the ideal way forward. At the same time, we should also strive to formalize and implement this IMEC as soon as possible. With these suggestions, we move forward to the next news of the day. PM Surya GHAR is a recently launched initiative of the Government of India to boost the solar power generation in our country. It has been recently in the news because the Ministry of Power has amended the electricity rules of 2020 to accelerate the installation of rooftop solar projects under the Surya GHAR Muft Bijli Yojana, which forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the theme of infrastructure and energy. So let's first try to inquire the provisions of the scheme. Well, the scheme was launched in the budget 2024 and it aims to light up 1 crore households in our country by the installation of rooftop solar, with which it aims to provide 300 units of free electricity per month to its beneficiaries who are going to install rooftop solar, and for which the government is going to provide a lot of subsidies and concessional bank loans to incentivize the people to install rooftop solar at their home or in their residential apartments. Also, the government is going to incentivize the urban local bodies and panchayats to promote the rooftop solar installation, for which the government has estimated that it is going to incur around 75,000 crore of expenditure. Now, this project has several potential benefits, such as it is going to be income saving and generation for the larger populace. How? Because of, let's say, we have installed rooftop solar in our houses. So, as per the government estimate, we will be able to save around rupees 15,000 to rupees 18,000 annually on our electricity bill. At the same time, we can sell the surplus of the electricity to discoms and we can generate some income as well. At the same time, it will also lead to the promotion of electrical vehicles because we can install a charging module for such electrical vehicles. And thus, under the FAME scheme, it will lead to the faster adoption of electric vehicles. Also, it is going to create a lot of entrepreneurship opportunities, for example, for the manufacturers of photovoltaic cells. At the same time, it will create employment opportunities for people who have technical capabilities in manufacturing of these photovoltaic cells, as well as installation of this rooftop solar and management of that. Also, it will help in our country to achieve our Glasgow commitment of achieving our 50% of total energy generation from renewable energy. Thus, the scheme holds a paramount importance for our country's energy security. Thus, the Ministry of Power has amended the Electricity Rules 2020 to ensure the faster installation of rooftop solar. So let's see what the ministry has done. First of all, it has eased down the technical feasibility test rules. So let's say I am a house and I want to install rooftop solar. For that, first what I need to do is that I need to apply to the nearby electricity department for this technical feasibility test or TFT. Earlier, such test used to take 20 days, but now such application shall be approved within 15 days. At the same time, if the photovoltaic system which I am going to install over my house, it is up to 10 kilowatt or less than 10 kilowatt, then no such TFT or technical feasibility test is required. At the same time, earlier what used to happen, that first I will apply to the department, then they will check the TFT, that whether my house is technically feasible or not, and then they will accept my application. But now they should first accept the application and then go for the testing. At the same time, the residential societies has been provided with the option to provide individual connection, or they can also opt for single point connection. At the same time, if there is any new electricity connection which is being sought by anyone and that person wants to install rooftop solar, then that approval should be given in 7 days in urban areas. Earlier it used to be 15 days, and within 15 days in rural areas, which earlier used to be 30 days. Also, it lays down certain responsibility for the DISCOMs or power distribution companies. First and foremost is that they are going to bear the entire cost of strengthening the distribution infrastructure. If the rooftop solar has the capacity of 5 kilowatt or lower, the entire cost will be borne by the DISCOMs. And the second is that they should provide a separate connection for electrical vehicle charging if I am a consumer and I request them that please provide me an electrical vehicle charging module, so the power DISCOM shall provide me with that. So obviously we can see that the scheme has a lot of noble aims. But at the same time, there are also certain issues which we can identify. Because we all know the poor financial condition of power distribution companies in our country. As per report of 2022 by the Central Electrical Authority, these DISCOMs had the dues of over 10 lakh crore. This was their financial loss in the year of 2022. Over and above which we are creating more and more burden on them. Thus, a rational restructuring of the scheme shall be done and some incentive shall also be provided to these distribution companies for efficient implementation of the aims of this scheme. With this suggestion, we move forward to the next news of the day. The Chalukyas of Badami have been in the news recently because of a discovery of Chalukyas temple in Mudi Manikyam village in Telangana or Andhra Pradesh, which shows the spread of Western Chalukyas rule. Now keep this in mind that these Western Chalukyas of Badami holds a very important place in the achievements of architecture in our ancient India, and at the same time the early development of temples in the Deccan region, which forms an important component of your GS1 paper under the theme of Indian culture and the salient aspects of architecture in the ancient India. So let's begin from studying about the recent finding which has taken place. So the Chalukyas of Badami ruled from 543 CE to 750 CE. This dynasty was established by Pulakesin I, who ruled from 543 to 566 C, and their territories were further extended under his successor Kirtivarman, who ruled from 566 to 597 C. These Chalukyas had their capital at the ancient city of Vatapi, which is the modern day Badami. So this place which you are looking at, this is the modern day Badami or the ancient day Vatapi. And this is your Patadakal and this is your Ehole. Now keep this in mind that these three regions of Ehole, Patadakal and Badami forms the group of UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and recently the inscriptions and temples has been found in the Mudi Manikyan village, which is on the bank of river Krishna in Andhra Pradesh. So earlier it used to be estimated that the eastward expansion, the extent of this Chalukyas empire stood at Jogulamba temple at Alampur and the submerged Yeleshwaram sites in Telangana, which is shown in the map here as A. So this used to be considered as their eastward extent of the empire. But with this recent discovery of Chalukyan temples and inscriptions in the Mudi Manikyan village of Andhra Pradesh here, now the extent of empire has been further extended up to the river Krishna. Now these Mudi Manikyam temples shows religious eclecticism. What does it mean? It means that these Chalukyan temples has the sculptures of various deities from various sects and religion, such as these Mudi Manikyam temples have the sculptures of Shivji, Vishnuji as well as of Buddhism and Jainism, thus showing the religious tolerance of these Chalukyas of Badami. Now the architecture of Chalukyas of Badami is what holds our interest for the upcoming prelims examination. So let's have a quick look about the architecture of the Chalukyas of Badami. So the architecture started developing under the reign of Mangalesh, who was the successor of Kirti Varman, and he ruled from 597 to 609 C, under which the cave architecture started developing in the Deccan region, where there are two important caves about which we should know about. First is Ravan Pahadi cave of Ehole, where we can see the god Shiva in Nataraj Mudra as shown in the figure. Also, there is existence of Saptamatrika cult, which over a period of time will evolve into the Durgaji cult. Also, we can see the figures which are present in this Ravan Pahadi cave are much more slender than Ellora and Badami caves. That is why a prominent art historian has said that these Chalukyas, they cut rock like a titan, but they shaped it like a jeweler's. Also, there are Badami caves which have both Vaishnava as well as Shaivite shrines, but majorly we see various incarnation of Vishnu ji here, such as Varaha and Vaman, etc. Now keep this in mind that this Varaha, or the symbol of Boer, was the royal symbol of Chalukyas. Then the further architectural activities took place in the region of Pulakesin II. Now before that, just have a quick look. This is your Ravan Pahadi cave, which is majorly of Shaivite, and we can see Shivji in his Nataraj Mudra, and this is your Badami cave, where we can see various avatar of God Vishnu. Also keep this in mind that just look at the architecture which they have built on the pillars and the various carvings there. Keep this in mind that all this has been crafted upon a rock cave. Now, under Pulakesin II, we can see the early development of temple architecture in the Deccan region. The temple architecture of Badami is called as Vesara style. Vesara, which has the elements of both Nagara as well as Dravid architecture. Here we can find the temples of both kind such as Niradhra and Sarandhra. Nirandhra means that the temple, the main sanctum sanctorum or garbhagriha where the deity's image is placed, there is no circumambulatory path. On the other hand, in Sarandhra, the deity has a circumambulatory path. Correct? Also, we can see that the superstructure. What is the superstructure of a temple? The superstructure of a temple which is directly above the sanctum sanctorum. So that superstructure we can find various kinds in Chalukyas of Badami architecture, such as we will see Nagara's Shikhar. We will also see the Viman of Dravid architecture. We can also see mandala kind of temples where there is no superstructure at all. So the major temple which was built in the region of Pulakesin II was Lat Khan temple at Ehole, which you can see in the image here. Here you can see the earliest stone temple, and this is a Shaivite temple as well as it was laid down in the Panchayatan style. Now, if you guys can recall from your history classes that Pulakesin II is the same person about which we read in Ehole inscription which was written by Ravi, which states that in the year of 630 CE, the Pulakesin II defeated the Harshvardhana of north and became the Lord of South or Dakshina Path. The writer of that Ehole inscription is Ravi, and Ravi built a Meguti Zan temple as you can see down here. In this temple, you will see all the features which became prominent in the later temple architecture. So you will see a pillared hall in the entrance, then there will be an antral or a period of gap, and after that you will have your garbhagriha or the sanctum sanctorum where the image of the main deity is placed. This was constructed by Ravi in the year of 634 CE. After the departure of Pulakesin II, the architectural activities of Chalukyas of Badami slowed down, but it reached its zenith under Loka Mahadevi, who built the Virupaksh temple. This Virupaksh temple is in Patadakal and lies at the left bank of Malprabha river. This Virupaksh temple was built in the year of 745 CE by Loka Mahadevi to commemorate the victory of her king Vikramaditya II, who fought the battle against Palwas at Kanchipuram and defeated them. This temple shows the early style or early development of Dravidian style, where you can see the Viman which we associate with the Dravidian kind of temples. This Viman, the panels of this Viman shows the story of Ramayana, and it also has a Kannada inscription which says that this temple was built by Tribhuvacharya. Also, there is an iconic feature of this temple that there is a Nandi shrine which is enclosed within the walls. Thus, this temple is paramountly Shaivite. With this information, We move forward to the next news of the day. The ISRO's CE-20 engine has been in the news because recently the ISRO has successfully tested this rocket engine named CE-20, which will be used to launch Gaganyaan mission, with which we are aspiring to take Indians into the space. This forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the theme of Achievements of Indians in Science and Technology, as well as awareness in the field of space. So, let's first try to inquire what is a cryogenic engine. A cryogenic engine basically operates on cryogenic or very low temperature fuels and oxidizer. For example, we take hydrogen as a gas and liquefy it at a low temperature of -253 degrees Celsius, which forms our fuel. And then we take the liquid oxygen, or we take the oxygen gas and liquefy it to the low temperature of -184 degrees Celsius, which forms our oxidizer to burn this fuel. Now one may wonder why hydrogen is considered as the desired fuel. Because it has the highest calorific value. What does it mean? It means that let's say we take 1 kg of diesel. And if we burn this 1 kg of diesel, the amount of energy or calorific value which this diesel will generate will amount to 45,000 kilojoule. However, if we are going to burn 1 kg of hydrogen, that is going to give us 1.5 lakh kilojoule energy. Thus, it has a really high amount of calorific value, which ultimately leads to its highest exhaust velocity. For example, if we are going to burn a liquid fuel which we use in our L110 stage or in our second stage of our LVM3 vehicle. So this second stage where we use the liquid fuel, it has the exhaust velocity of 3.5 km per second. On the other hand, the hydrogen has the exhaust velocity of 4.5 km per second. At the same time, when we liquefy this gas, it requires a very low space and thus a very small size of the tank, which obviously leads to its less weight of rocket and thus the higher the speed of the rocket. Or at the same time, as per Hindu report, there are also certain drawbacks of using hydrogen as a fuel. First is that it needs to be maintained constantly at a low temperature, and at the same time, as we all know, that hydrogen is a very reactive gas and thus it leads to its leakage very easily. This hydrogen is used as a fuel only in the upper stage of the launch vehicle to propel the payload from the initial launch to the desired orbit. So what we are using in our initial launches? We use the solid stage, which is S200, and the liquid stage, which is L110 stage. In this solid stage, we use solid fuels. These solid fuels can be your RDX, it can be your ammonium nitrate. All this can be your solid fuel. Now, this solid fuel obviously generates a lot of energy or exhaust capacity, but at the same time, it has a major drawback that it does not have a controlled chain reaction. Thus, we cannot systematically put the satellite into the orbit which we want because we cannot control the chain reaction of this solid fuel. On the other hand, we use liquid fuels such as dimethyl tetrahydrazine, or we also use N2O4 or nitrate tetraoxide. These two are used as a liquid fuel. And finally, hydrogen is used for our third stage. Now let's try to inquire the difference between CE 7.5 rocket engine and CE 20 engine. Well, in India, we have three kinds of cryogenic engine. The first is KVD1, the second is CE 7.5, and the third is CE 20. Out of these three, these two, CE 7.5 and CE 20 is indigenous. However, the design of this CE 7.5 is actually based on KVD1. And this KVD1 cryogenic rocket engine was supplied to India by Russia in the year of 1980, which obviously angered one particular country, which was USA, who tried to sanction and make sure that India should not have the cryogenic capability. However, now with CE 20, we have developed our own indigenous design. So let's try to understand what is the difference. The CE 7.5 works upon a staged combustion cycle, where to initiate the launch, first before that a small amount of fuel is combusted in the pre-burner, which results into the heat which drives the turbine that powers the cryopump. And this cryopump brings fuel and oxidizer finally to the combustion chamber, where ultimately the hydrogen, which is the fuel, and the oxidizer, which is LOX, they meet together, the hydrogen combusts and it powers the main engine, thus providing the thrust which leads to the launch of the rocket. However, in C20 it has a gas generated cycle, where it does not use exhaust from the pre-burner cycle, and as you guys can see in the diagram, it directly sends the fuel and the oxidizer to the combustion chamber. At the same time, it does not use vernier thrusts like CE 7.5, rather it uses the nozzles here to adjust the rocket's path. Now this has few advantages and few disadvantages. The disadvantage is that it reduces the fuel efficiency, and C20 rocket engine is heavier than CE 7.5. However, the advantage, and that is why we considered it for our Gaganyaan test, is that it is easier to build and test. At the same time, it provides the highest maximum thrust. So this is the major difference between CE 7.5 and CE 20. So let's try to inquire and read about CE 20 in a bit detail. With the development of this cryogenic engine, India has become the 6th space power in the world to develop its own indigenous design for cryogenic engine after countries such as US, Russia and China. Also, we are going to use it with our GSLV Mark III or Launch Vehicle Mark III, which is going to take our Gaganyaan mission into the space. It has the capacity to carry up to 8 tons of weight to the lower Earth orbit. At the same time, it has been designed by Launch Propulsion System Corporation, which has its offices in Bangalore and Thiruvananthapuram. The C20 will power the LVM-3 in the third stage, and it will make possible for the LVM-3 to launch vehicle to lift up to the 8 tons of weight to lower Earth orbit. At the same time, India has conducted a lot of human rating testing, where we test each and every equipment which is associated with this particular mission 1000 times. Because as per NASA's Crew Space Program launched in 2011, the probability of failure of the mission should stand as low as 0.2%. So is India ready for this mission? Yes, because as per ISRO, the 4 C-20 engines had been hot fire tested for a cumulative 8,810 seconds, which is over and above the requirement of 6,350 seconds. As the Gaganyaan mission is scheduled to launch in the middle of the 2024, as Indians we all should be hopeful to add another feather in the cap of our space achievements. With this, we have reached to the end of our discussion today. Do not forget to attempt the questions at the end of the video and test your knowledge. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best and thank you.